And we're changing that music soon because of me. Because I'm going to compose some shitty electronic music.
Oh, no.
Yes.
I veto that option.
No, Luke gave me the all clear. Anyway,
you realize we have now just gone live.
Yeah, that's why I started with that. All right, everyone. welcome to Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit. And no, I'm not sitting in a box factory. This is actually my distillery, and this is where boxes are stored, used boxes. Oh, tonight we're across 3 countries, which is super cool. Actually, I think this is the first.
It is a first.
It is first, yeah. And we have Tash Gill from Cardrona across the ditch in NZ. So, Tash, how are you?
I am doing well, mate. I'm doing well. Although I'd like to take issue with this Aussie Craft Distillers thing because we're at a 3-1 here in terms of Kiwis to Australians. So, the tables have turned. It's all looking positive.
Yeah. We got to own up. Kiwis in the house. Hands up, Kiwis in the house. I'm not the only one. Come on.
Yeah, right here. Yeah, I had to do away with my whole preamble and pre-jokes and throw them all out the window because I realized I was talking to a couple of fellow Kiwis.
Yeah, but they're defected Kiwis though. So can you call them real Kiwis?
No.
Hey, look, you're always welcome to come home. Dave Dobbin said so.
All right. So we have Luke.
Also, Tash has gracefully accepted to step in to Sarah, who's unable to join us tonight. And for those that don't know, Tash has been part of Cardrona Distillery for all of 2 days. So,
round of applause.
Yes,
but
part of Cardrona for 2 days, but a very long history.
Officially,
yeah.
All right, so Luke's in Edinburgh. Todd's in Sydney. Tash is in Cardrona.
Wanaka. Yep.
Wanaka. I was trying to think actually where is Cardrona? And me, I'm in.
It's in Cardrona, is where Cardrona is.
So Cardrona is actually a place, yeah.
Yes. It is the Cardrona Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, Cardrona Valley. Right. Okay. All right. Well, let's rip into it, eh? So first things first. What is everyone drinking? We know it. It's 5 a.m. in Edinburgh, and Luke's on the beers already. It looks a bit.
It is actually 11 a.m.
So you.
So it's socially acceptable to be drinking now, I believe. I have found myself a whiskey because most places don't open before 12. But I'm at this little bar called the Scotsman's Lounge.
Cool.
And I'm sitting out on the street with a Highland Park 12.
Oh, nice.
So that's the start of my day.
Yep. Excellent. I see with these sandstone in the background, that's very Edinburgh, isn't it?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, love it. Love it. All right. So, Tash, what is in your Tash? Yeah, I caught myself right at the end, but I paused. For effect.
Hey, look, in honor to it's a hotel wine.
Awesome.
It is, but in honor of my Australian friends, it is a petite syrah from across the ditch. So sweet, fruity. It was available.
Very nice.
Yeah,
it was there.
But I could tell you a story about how it's the end of a long night, but I don't have any whiskey with me. But this kind of pays homage to our love of wine casks and finishing our whiskey in wine casks. But actually, I just felt like a petite syrah. So
very nice. She's good. She's a professional, and that's why she's on the payroll. All right, I'm drinking 2 things. I'm drinking little number I picked up, which I really enjoyed. I was down at Yak Creek, down in Yakandanda, and caught up with Jamie, friend of the show, and we're getting Jamie on fairly shortly from Yak Creek. This is his apple brandy, and it's very, very tasty. And I said, mate, I want to buy a bottle. And he goes, here it is. Just take it. So I just cook it. And our friends from Aisling, and this is the last of the rum that I've got. So I thought I would have a little rum to finish. And
Nice.
I'm set. So what do you got, Todd? What's in yours?
In homage of our guests, I'm going to have a Cardrona Falcon. Look at the packaging on this thing.
That's
Very
very
good.
nice.
It's
Yeah,
very
some-
nice. So that's what
Some
I go
vanilla, some toffee, some sun-kissed nectarines, I believe.
for. All the
Sun-kissed
above.
nectarines.
Mm.
That sounds fancy.
As if they were plucked warm from the orchard, you know?
Oh,
So,
By elves.
very nice.
By wee hobbits, actually.
Yeah, you hobbits.
Now that the hobbits are finished making the movies, we've set them to work in the orchards.
yeah, got time they've got to do something useful.
All right, let's go into Cardrona. So, Tash, tell us, go right back to the start if you wouldn't mind. How
Yesterday.
the vision started. Yeah, you've been there 2 days.
Yeah.
Where are you at on your journey? Because you've been making whiskey for quite some time, I believe.
Yeah, I love telling the story of Cardrona. One of the key pieces to understand is that Desiree, our founder, is a woman of remarkable kind of character, and when she sets her mind to something, you know, she's a woman of real clarity and vision. And so she had come out of farming and was looking for the next kind of project and what it was going to be. And there was a lot of exploration around, might it be perfume? And that led to some study of, you know, how to actually, you know, open a perfumery, which led to distillation, which led her back full circle to, you know, some of the years that she spent overseas working in pubs and serving whiskey and her love of whiskey. And that then kind of took us down this pathway of building the distillery. It's no easy feat to build a distillery, full stop. It's even more of an accomplishment to build it in a valley that is prized for its, well, at the time, its remoteness, but it's next to one of New Zealand's greatest ski fields. It's tucked in beside a tiny little town that is just a gorgeous lake. But yeah, no small undertaking. And so the work, the research, the resource consents, the planning, all of those components, the architecture, all started in the early 2010s. But the first barrels were actually filled in 2015 now. November 5th was the first barrel. You know, give or take an hour or two, but November 5th was kind of the first barrel that's kind of known as Cardrona's birthday, which conveniently happens to be Desiree's mum's birthday as well. So we've been making whiskey now for 9 years, give or take. The goal was always to, you know, release our core range into these expressions that were, you know, 10 years old, and some of our core expressions, so the Falcon, which will be sort of an ongoing, it's a limited edition release, so it's a batched whiskey, but following the same flavor profile and a combination of casks, and so, you know, kind of I liken it similar to like an Abalua Bunna, you know, where it has a very precise profile, but but each of those 3 casks being chosen and married for each batch. That's something that, you know, as time has gone on in the valley, we've kind of gone, okay, these whiskies are ready to pull now, and so, but we're on that journey to having that core age statement release as well, which is pretty exciting. And I think, you know, people take different approaches to creating whiskey, particularly when you know you've got a long range. So our climate here, cold and dry, then very hot and dry. So our cycles of whiskey and cask, you know, really they work hard, but they work slowly. And so, you know, we're just now starting to reap the benefits of that. At the same time, we've had an amazing group of supporters, both through, you know, private cask sales, which are no longer available, through to just people who have loved opening and experiencing the progress reports. So Just Hatched, Growing Wings, Full Flight, which has really been a way of people being able to experience the story of Cardrona whiskey unfolding in the cask, you know, as we go.
So you're on the South Island.
We are, yeah.
So
we're not,
you
not quite
before,
the southernmost distillery.
Right. That's all right. You don't need that claim to fame. You just need to be the best.
And the prettiest. Yeah.
It's a pretty
So,
beautiful setup, really. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
trying to see if I can grab a shot from somewhere. But,
so Todd, you were over there only a few weeks ago, weren't you?
the beginning of June, I was there.
Yeah, right. So you're near Wanaka?
Yeah, so we're
So it's
about 25 minutes away from Wanaka, about 45 minutes from Queenstown over the hill, Queenstown being our closest international airport. So for all the Aussies that want to come and visit, that's your spot. Fly right into Queenstown,
Yeah.
jump over the
Such a
hill.
beautiful area. Such a beautiful area.
Truly
I
is.
went. I
As
did
an
New
Aussie
Zealand.
that's flown into Queenstown, it is the way to get into New Zealand. I can tell
Yeah,
you.
right.
There is hardly any queues. You just walk straight through customs. It's lovely. It's a stress-free way to get into a country, I can tell you.
Wow. There you go.
And
Well,
when you finally
incidentally,
get through customs, it's nice fresh air.
what I found when coming into the UK was straight through. They didn't check fucking anything. Anything. I just walked straight through from the airport, and I was dumbfounded compared to what we have in Australia. Weird.
But do you have the same thing in Australia where coming through customs, really the only thing people care about is not contraband, it's not, how many cigars or how many bottles of whiskey did you bring through? They just care about whether or not you bought dirty hiking boots?
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. How much mud is on your boots? How much mud is on your boots?
They'll crash tackle you if
Yeah.
you're trying to.
Most certainly.
And don't even think about bringing an apple through. You leave that on the plane.
Leave that shit at home.
Yeah,
So
you're calling out the assault force with bringing apple into the country.
Absolutely. So you've been officially with Cardrona now for 2 days.
Yes.
But you have a long history with Cardrona in other ways. Tell us a little bit about your history.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I have carved out a bit of a path as a spirits journalist, as a drinks journalist in New Zealand, which we've got a lot of wine writers. That has something to do with how much wine we make. But we haven't historically had a lot of spirits journalists. And so that's kind of been my sort of side hustle for a number of years. And then as our craft distilling movement has grown, I've done more and more work in that space. And additionally to that, have brought my day job of strategy, storytelling, business consultancy into that world more and more. And so over the years, I wrote a feature that was in Whiskey Magazine a couple of years ago that was on Cardrona. That was the first New Zealand distillery really to be featured in Whiskey Magazine. So that's pretty exciting. And
I remember that.
Yeah. It was, and so that's why. So, I say I love telling the Cardrona story. It's partly because I've been telling it for years. So the opportunity to both talk about that story, to share that story with others, to let people kind of peek behind the curtain, but also, I work as a spirits judge, and so have long followed and kind of celebrated the development of the spirit, I guess. And we're in the early formation of the New Zealand Whisky Association, and so I sit as the chair of that. As we work pretty collaboratively together. Because our industry is growing, we signed off on our internal industry regulations a few years ago now. And so the work to kind of ensure that everybody's working to that same standard, slightly different to Australia, but that suits us and it suits what we're trying to achieve as a tiny little island nation. So that's been kind of the long association, and with such a tight community here, you build relationships and you build the kind of the strength of that, knowing the challenges that people face, knowing the celebrations over time. So it kind of it paints a really nice canvas to then kind of launch into now working with the distillery and being able to bring all of those skills into one place to help them sort of go to the next stage.
Can we talk about the New Zealand distilling scene? Because it is relatively new, but it's let me clarify that. Modern day small craft distillers are relatively new, but it's exploded. And what's super cool, my observation, is no one's going down a singular path in making whiskey in particular. They're all going off in different directions and exploring different ways of making things. So it's very creative.
Mhm.
Can you just give a quick snapshot of say where the scene was like 5 years ago and where the scene is right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, 5 years ago, 5 years ago, one of the sort of the sleeping giants of New Zealand whiskey, Pocono. So Cardrona's always been very public about what we were doing, and obviously building something as iconic and beautiful, very easy to spot and go, hey, what's that thing that's going on? And we went to market with a gin product and a vodka product and a beautiful range of liqueurs pretty early on, and so we've always been quite upfront about what's been happening there. Let's have the New Zealand Whiskey Collection further south, which is kind of the another great Australian involved in it. And so their story is a little bit different as well. But 5 years ago, Pocono whiskey, which is again a world-class whiskey, and I think that's one thing we love to celebrate what everybody is achieving. Nobody even really knew what they were doing, and they were building this state-of-the-art distillery in Pocono, which is a little village south of Auckland, now a large village actually. And they came out the gate 2 years ago with their aged product ready to go to market and shipping in vast quantities for our market. So that jump in 5 years it's not necessarily about how much more whiskey is being made, but it's actually about how much more whiskey is in market and how much more people are aware of it. So Waiheke Whiskey being another great example of that. Mark and Rowe and their team there, they'd been making whiskey.
We had them on only a month or so ago.
Yeah. So they'd been making whiskey for 10 years over on the island, and kind of going, okay, how does that roll? And so part of the beauty, particularly, in Auckland, where there's a number of kind of distillers centered. We used to have distillers drinks. I don't know how I got a pass into that. I'm not quite sure how. I just kind of weasel my way in there. But we would regularly have distillers drinks, and so these whiskey makers, all before they had whiskey to market, getting together and tasting samples, sharing knowledge. Encouraging and helping one another. Matt Johns from Pocono comes from an incredibly rich background. He and his wife Celine, of whiskey making and spirits industry, and so he brought a wealth of knowledge and help. And that's I think the difference now is that when there's one or two of you and you're doing quite different things, and you're still in the development process, that's the emergence of an industry. Now in 2024, we had 28 whiskies, 28 New Zealand whiskies, all made to the New Zealand whiskey regulations. So guidelines, but with plenty of room for innovation. That kind of goes to the point that you were making before. 28 entries in the New Zealand whiskey category, and that wasn't even Pocono or Cardrona entered. And so that as a category shows the growth. 16 entries 3 years ago to 28 entries plus 4 or 5 expressions from Cardrona, 4 or 5 expressions from Pocono in the mix, available on the market at the moment. That's an outstanding increase. And I think what's encouraging overall, is the quality of what's happening the quality of what's happening for where we are in the age and stage of our market. So I'm being diplomatic there, but there's just and people are showing it because Pocono and Cardrona are scooping up awards as our Waiheke, and I'm sure that there's just more of that to come. So it's pretty exciting time for us. I think that the markers of it, right, are just the collegial nature of it, which, in many respects reminds me of the Tasmanian whiskey community. I spent a lot of time with them last year. And you kind of go, okay, there's a lot of similarity, even though I think the two industries are vastly different. The Tasmanian whiskey space, so different from what's happening in New Zealand. They're not good or bad, but just, different. There's a different kind of mode. Yeah.
So looking at
how many distillers? Sorry, how many distillers distilleries are there in NZ now?
Officially, pre-commercial, commercial, and are we counting the garages? Because
official commercial distilleries, I think.
Yeah. So official. Yeah. Okay. Official commercial would fluctuate between about 96 and 112 by my count. But that's including, gin, vodka, liqueurs. We have an amazing brandy distillery.
Mm.
Like, you know, so there's some really cool and creative stuff going on. I don't know if you guys have seen the Strange Nature gin. I mean, that
No,
as a
not
product
yet.
is.
Yes, I have.
Can I tell? Yeah,
amazing.
can I tell you an amazing story about this product? Because
Go for it.
one of the things you'll so I very proudly wear a Cardrona shirt now, but just love to champion brands, and I think this is indicative of celebrating what we have in New Zealand in a really unique way. So the Strange Nature gin just scooped up at like the highest score that a New Zealand spirit has ever got at IWSC, in 98.5, I think. But what it is it's the removed alcohol component from a wine, from a Sauvignon Blanc wine, that then has been distilled with only one botanical, juniper, to create an altogether unique gin that is absolutely delicious. And I think, you know, there's just some of that amazing kind of innovation happening, and it's happening across industries. So wine coming into distillation, you know, but in ways that are really kind of unique. Done some amazing research in Taranaki about how, you know, farmers can add value to their land by looking at growing botanical crops specifically for the gin industry. You know, there's just a world of really cool stuff going on.
Yeah.
Beautiful bottle too.
Just before we get too far away from this point, there was no. It's just something that you're saying earlier about backyard distilling and all that sort of stuff, which sort of was a good segue into a question from the audience.
Ooh, yes.
Okay, so can Tash share some of the New Zealand rules around whiskey making? Because no doubt they're very different from Australia, and then very different from Scotland.
Well,
or very similar to Scotland.
I can, and so now I'm like, oh no, I'm going to actually have to go and look them up, which I'm going to do in the background just quickly, just to make sure that I don't get it wrong, because it is late at night, guys.
That's no excuse. These should be memorized. You should be able to reel them off like all 480 points.
They were.
Back of the hand.
They were at one point. Honestly, I had the incredible privilege of being able to lead I'd spent some years living in the States, and every time I came home, I'd check in with the whiskey distillers around how they were progressing with the regulation. And they weren't getting very far, you know, and fair enough, because they're all really busy doing what they needed to do. So I was lucky enough to be able to kind of jump in and help facilitate that process and finishing out the process, because I was stuck home for COVID. So what I would say, first and foremost, I would love to see a copy of the Australian rules for whiskey. I haven't seen
it's easy. In wood for 2 years, looks like, smells like, tastes like whiskey. Well, that's it. That's it, people.
Exactly. So what we wanted to do was take a benchmark that would basically produce some really important outcomes for us. So the outcome being, and look, New Zealand it's an export nation, right? So we've always been about how do you maximize value and how do you export and make sure that the world knows that we're amazing. Because I don't know if it's because we're incredibly patriotic and proud, or if it's that we're constantly trying to just prove ourselves to the rest of the world by being awesome at everything. But a big component is, if we're going to make whiskey here, it needs to be awesome. It needs to be world class. So the key outcomes were a quality product for consumers in the industry, so that consumers could have a sense of this isn't moonshine, or if it is moonshine, it's well made, but it isn't moonshine. That it's that we were able to secure or start building, you know, a whiskey platform for the New Zealand whiskey brand that built confidence internationally, that we would agree some naming, production and labelling conventions. And again, that's actually about consumer benefit and about building that brand platform internationally. The development of a really positive, supportive community for whiskey producers. And I think we still have that going, you know, especially as more brands are coming to market, just to continue being, you know, and as, you know, Cardrona, we champion other distilleries. We've got, you know, Scapegrace just down the road from us, technically, if you call, you know, 40 minutes just down the road, but they're building, you know, a massive distillery that's going to be world class. We champion that. We're so excited about it because we know that we'll all benefit from having more whiskey producers in the single community, and then clear origin of products. So all that being said, our rules are actually really kind of straightforward. We did want to lean into honouring the Scottish history that many of our that many of our distilleries have followed, but again, leaving space. So I guess the big ones are, the single malt. I'll talk about what's different because that's probably the easiest one. So our single malt definition, our New Zealand whiskey definition just covers blended, vatted, what the rules are to say, okay, this is a New Zealand whiskey. And if it's blended with something that's imported, here's what we want you to declare on the label. Or to make it straightforward for people. And then when it comes to single malt, because it's a confusing name anyway.
It's a very confusing name, and I'm constantly trying to convey that single malt isn't what you think it is.
Yeah. So we hi Mark. Oh, bro. Oh, can't wait to see you again very soon. And yes, thank you for the congratulations. Mark Teague, he's awesome. Whiskey is my jam. Love that guy. So the key thing being in our New Zealand single malt definition, the piece that we really had to argue with, and this is a similar challenge that Tasmania has found, is where do you draw the line between where your brewing happens, so that mashing, that fermentation, where does that happen? Because for so many of our distillers, they're working in 1,200, 1,500 litre stills, and so they don't necessarily have the full brewing kind of kit that would come with a traditional Scottish style single malt where everything happens in house. So we allowed the definition.
I'm out for a second. Hang on. No, we're not talking about beer boilers. No, it's got nothing to do about beer boilers. It's all right. I'm just having a discussion with someone who's going to pick a fight with me later on.
Now, because you said the word, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble.
So, just to clarify,
just quietly, Luke and I don't endorse anything that comes out of Crafty's mouth.
No,
just this is purely. Hang on, this is my opinion, and under Australian law, I'm entitled to my opinion, right?
It's a big statement.
Where's the mute Crafty button on my mobile?
No.
I can find it.
There is.
Oh, there it is. I found it.
It's funny. You got him. This reminds me of the old radio days. Dump button. Let's fix that 3-second delay. Okay, and good.
Okay, so the term beer boilers is not a derogatory term, despite what some people think, right? But in Australia, there are variations within what is the beer boiler. A beer boiler could be someone that actually buys in a wash from a brewery. It's a generic wash, and they don't have any input into the making of that product. And at the other end of the spectrum, it's where a distiller is actually just using the brewing equipment, and they go there with their grain, with their yeast. They're doing it all. So in NZ, what is the situation with the beer boiling side of it?
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
To be honest, like I would struggle, and look, I don't know what everybody is doing, down to the nth degree, but as far as I'm aware, the majority, by far the majority, I would say all that I am aware of, is that if somebody is having their mash, if somebody is having their brewing done contract, from all the way through, then typically they've got 100% control or input into what that mash bill is, what's happening in terms of yeast, in terms of fermentation, to get effectively a quality wort that they feel happy with, that they can then take through into distillation. And so and there are a couple of really important reasons as to why we made that clarification or made that distinction in the regulation. And that's because some of our best whiskies, some of our most awarded whiskies, so Thompson whiskey, for example, if you're not familiar, amazing story. But they're actually, the distillery is based in the back of a brewery, but they contract their mash through and then port it through to distillation. Same with what the New Zealand Whiskey Collection are doing now in Dunedin with the Spates Brewery there. So, we wanted to allow space for some of our already iconic, well-known brands to continue to do what they were doing to a high standard and quality. because what they've demonstrated, particularly Thompson, have really demonstrated that you can have a really cohesive relationship. There's another brewer, 8 Wide Brewing. We're doing a bunch of contract brewing for people, but again, the distiller is really hands-on involved in the recipe. And there's no way to enforce that. It is, you have to kind of gentleman's agreement or person's agreement it, but because there's no enforcing body. But for the most part, people want quality, and I don't know a single producer in the New Zealand industry that would just be happy to kind of purchase wash off a website in the same way that you go, oh yeah, I'll get a bucket of that generic tea. Thanks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, 100%. And what about your age category? So in Australia, it's 2 years, but there's definitely a groundswell that we need to move it to 3 years to align us with what's happening internationally. But you're at 3 years in NZ, are you?
No, 2 years in a day.
2 years, is it?
Yeah, 2 years in a day. And for good reason, because we couldn't get everybody out of two schools of thought. So this is my personal opinion. So taking my Cardrona hat off, taking just my personal opinion is that I think if you're using small barrels, if you are trying to get to maturation in 50 litre, 100 litre barrels, you have a ton of work to, you've got so much more work that has to go into monitoring and caring for that spirit to make sure that you're not just getting flavor imparted from wood, but that you're actually getting real quality maturation of the spirit. And that really does happen from spirit going in and out of wood in those cycles. That's where the maturation happens, which is different from accumulating flavor, right? And so and I think we've probably all been in that situation where we've tasted something that's and I always say the Kiwi palate is big, bold, strong. You can't go wrong, right? You hand a Kiwi something that's big and sweet and robust, and it's got a shit ton of tannins in it, and they're going to go, oh, that's so good. You hand them a 50%, ABV something, and they're going to go, oh, that burn means it's good because it's strong, right? That's, and not to talk down the Kiwi palate, but it's just that generally speaking is what we go for. And I think there's a little bit of that in Australia too, but it's moving past that to go, quality spirit stands up. How do we get to quality spirit? What does that look like? So I think, if you go for us, we had a number of distilleries who were part of that kind of foundation industry movement that were committed to 50 litre and 100 litre barrels. Even down in Dunedin, New Zealand Whisky Collection, had adopted a lot of that Tasmanian influence from Greg in the early days. And so there were a lot of kind of very small barrels being put down that, and we've all tasted sometimes, not necessarily drawing a line between things. But I think we've all tasted, when robust spirit that perhaps has had a slightly wide cut has gone into a barrel that isn't necessarily it's not necessarily going to give the spirit enough time to mature through those 17, 18 cycles that it needs to move through the seasons to take on maturation of spirit as well as the wood character. There's just that wood to spirit contact ratio gets all out, and then so you're dealing with a really different kind of flavor profile. And there are some drinkers who love that. But if we're talking about quality overall and we're saying, hey, how do we set up an industry for long-term success where producers aren't just relying on quick turnover of barrels based on small production runs to get to cash flow, but at the same time, we're not inhibiting people from producing a quality product that meets a kind of flavor standard by saying, hey, you've got to keep it in barrel for 3 years. Right? Because that's the thing. You could, for a time there, it was easy to access 100 litre barrels from Master Cask, and it was easy to get smaller barrels to produce in smaller runs, so you could fill more barrels. It all looks good for your short-term cash flow. But you throw a 3 year minimum or 3 year in a day minimum on that, and you're not actually helping people to produce a better product. So we were comfortable to say, yep, 2 years. Now, that being said, I know very few. I could name them, but I won't. I know very few New Zealand distilleries that are actually aging for anything less than 3.5 to 4 years.
Yeah.
The
spirit is ready when it's ready.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Well, sometimes, right? But that's not always that's not always the case when you were starting out. And so sometimes you do have to release something earlier than you want because you need cash flow or you need something to give your supporters. And, look, I've been in the calls where I've tasted something again, put with my independent hat on. I've tasted something and I've rung the distiller and I've said, first rule first, ask permission. Can I give you feedback? And if I said, I want to give you feedback. Can I give you feedback? Is now a good time? If not, let me know when. Cool. Because, it's a deeply personal thing. And I've been in those phone calls where I've said, I know you're planning to release this in 3 months or in 6 months. Would you consider holding off for another 8 months or another 9 months? Give it a little bit more time in barrel, because at the same time as we want our industry to grow, we also want our industry to grow, with a benchmark where it's like, the spirit was ready. And because the spirit was ready at that point, the first award shot was in, it picked up golds and silvers, or it picked up silvers, knowing that it's on a trajectory to gold,
So with that in mind, so I'm assuming that Cardrona are mainly using 200 litre barrels?
All full size.
All full size barrels.
Yeah. So 200s, 225s. Yes.
Testing you there.
Yeah. I had to, but did you see me check the mental database?
Yeah.
We got some big boys floating around in there too. And, and at Cardrona, the casking strategy has always been pretty solid.
The birthday barrel, that's like 500 litres, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's a big boy.
Takes up a big position in the middle of the warehouse.
Yeah. Well, and things have had a bit of a move around recently. So it's always fun having a look when you go in and you go, oh, what's moved? But yes, so that we've got some big boys sitting there. Cardrona's always had a pretty solid kind of cask strategy, which I think is, important. Cask strategy, wood management, whatever you want to call it. We've always, focused pretty clearly on really strong relationships with local winemakers who are already using premium quality casks, producing premium quality wines. So Felton Road makes a lot of appearances. The odd Mount Difficulty Pinot Noir cask has been in the mix. We've got really solid bourbon casks coming in from Heaven Hill. And we have really beautiful selections of sherry casks, both in the PX and the Oloroso. And, that's like... Desiree doesn't come to play games, man. She's got a crystal clear vision of exactly where she wants the product to be, and the team shares that. And so, there's never been, has Cardrona had all of the same challenges that a startup distillery has, 100%, but it's always it's always played the premium game from the very outset because and there is a sense of this is best.
Yeah. So with all those beautiful barrels coming in from wine, hold your horses. So with all those beautiful barrels coming in from these wineries, are you then recoupering those? Are you recharring those? Are you doing wet fills? How are you handling those barrels?
What's a wet fill? Why does anybody even talk about a wet fill? What are you on? Like what?
Just tip out the old stuff and put in some new stuff.
Do we need to go back to that conversation about what's actually flavouring the whiskey? Is it the wood? Is it the wine? Or is it the maturation?
It's all part of the question, really, isn't it?
Can I?
It's an invalid question. I object to the question. Leading the witness.
No, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
All right.
Tasha, I'll give you a good example. So at Craftworks, we have a style of whiskey called I Am, which is a combination of Spanish sherry casks.
Which ones?
Shiraz casks. These are all toasted and charred, right? Oloroso, PX, and also Manzanilla. But we also have wet fill, vintage port cask from Mudgee. And that brings in a real sort of cough syrup note, which is quite a substantial flavor base. It doesn't dominate, but it definitely adds another dimension. So
is it delicious?
Of toast and charred and wet. And there's a number of distilleries in Australia that go straight into wets and get some very, very interesting profiles. So, I'm intrigued. drill down a bit more on what you're saying on wet cast versus toast and charred, because it's an interesting perspective.
No, well, so obviously I'm going for a punchline and controversy and just wanting to rack the viewers up to make sure that they're all like, wow, what the heck? It's all an execution. Like, so one of the things I love about what's happening in some of the Australian whiskey scene is that there is some really experimental stuff going on that's out the gate, and it's like, oh yeah, cool. And a lot of that experimental product makes it to market.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and there's some stuff I've tasted where I'm like, I don't know if I would, like, that's bold, like, cool, you've done this thing, and I'm like, I don't know what but that's me. I'm a judgy little, piece of work, whatever. Literally judgy. I'll be in Australia in 2 weeks' time judging the Australian Distilled Spirits Awards. Enjoy your judging then. But anyway, so I think anything is permissible, and it's all about the execution. So I think you can wet fill and it can be awesome. But do I think that there are people who are wet filling without necessarily having, because in any industry that's new, and this is not a comment on the New Zealand industry but in any industry that is new, I think you've got to be realistic that a ton of distillers, particularly craft distillers, are people who are learning on the job. And so there's not a ton of hands-on apprentice style mentoring and learning happening yet. It's happening in pockets, right? Where there's investment.
That actually raises an interesting point. Sorry to butt in there. It raises an interesting
you got to butt in, otherwise you'll never get a word in.
A point of difference between the Australian scene and the New Zealand scene. Mm-hmm. We've spoken to a lot of Australian distilleries, and we ask the question, so how did you get into distilling? And how did you start? And the answer is always inevitably, oh, well, I went and did the course.
Yeah, IBD smashing it in Australia.
Yeah, with as straight a face as they possibly can, that they did it legally and above board. Now, with New Zealand, obviously, you can, and I never believe it for a second. In New Zealand, you can distill legally at home for your own consumption, and so you can build up your skills before you go pro.
Yeah.
Do you think
you can build up
doing that?
You can build up your skills before you go pro.
Move on to this, by the way.
But are they?
Oh, nice! Look at that.
Yeah. Good example.
That feels like asking me to throw my nation under the bus. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around. As the only
Australian here,
that's a good Kiwi spirit. Give it a go.
No, I am so anti-tall poppy. It's not even funny. Do you know that the tall poppy syndrome that we deal with in New Zealand and a little bit in Australia as well?
A little bit.
But it comes from our egalitarian nature. No, it comes from our egalitarian nature. So TRA, I'm going to get real nerdy. Everybody who's used to this being a really fun comedic podcast is just about to go, oh my goodness, get this woman off the screen.
They are not used to that at all.
But with three Kiwis on the room, I'll dive into this for a second. So Kiwis and Australians love to tear each other down and love to give a reason as to why somebody is not entitled to the praise or not worthy of the whatever. And you only got to be in New Zealand for like a couple of years and it starts to rub off on you. And I don't like it. And because we operate in an industry that's full of rules and regulations and competitions where everybody's trying to compete and be the best anyway. And so that's why, I think it's such an important value of mine personally, but it's also a value of Cardrona. And that's one of the reasons why I think there's such, good alignment there, is that, we support the whole, we want to celebrate it all. If it's good, we're supporting it. If it's good, we're celebrating it. But New Zealanders have a really strong value on egalitarianism, which means everybody is equal and everybody's treated equal. And so the flip side of that egalitarian value that we have, right, is that if somebody gets treated like they're special, we don't know what to do with that. And so we've got to bring them back down so that everybody's equal again, right? Oh yeah, good job. But, next year, whatever. And it's a weird thing. But so I don't want to say, hey, there's a ton of New Zealand distillers out there who aren't learning on the job, that they're not getting better, because it's not true. And so the story that I would tell in this instance is Black Collar Rum, who did an amazing. So when they're based up in Northland, a beautiful part of the country, and beautiful rum that they're producing. The first rums that they entered into some of the awards, judged them. I was like, yeah, okay, we're on a journey here. There's some really commendable stuff, and they were silver medals. And the guys took those results and they took the feedback from the judges away, and they turned around and they came back into the competition the next year, and their next versions of those same rums had been so fine-tuned and refined that they just smashed out gold. And it was such a palatable difference, that you could just go, man, here's the batch from 2022, and here's the batch from 2023, and this is outstanding. Right, this is like even gone to that next level. So I think there are tons of New Zealand distillers who are just getting better and better and better, and I think that's awesome. And so I want to celebrate that. And I think everybody can take that opportunity to learn. What I would say is that the step from home distiller in the garage to distilling for commercial outcomes is probably way too short. So it's really just a matter of you get your CCA, you get your license, and then you're away laughing. Your liquor license to sell online. And so there's a ton of people who are still making spirits in their garage off 50-litre stills, but they've got the CCA and they've got the liquor license, and so they're selling them off a website 6 bottles at a time. And that's that's where I think there's room for growth. Controversially, I think it would be a great thing for New Zealand if it was no longer possible to distill at home without some appropriate licensing. I actually think for the industry, the fact that you can, it's like the snake will eventually eat its tail. If we don't actually put in some barriers of both quality and education and safety practices to ensure that, and that's for consumers as well. I tell 2 funny stories there. One is of a spirit that was sent to me as a sample. I opened it up and I was like, firstly, just the smell coming off it was just out the gate, and my sense was this is nowhere near what's written on the label in terms of the ABV. And so I took it to a mate's distillery, had him run a test on it, and sure enough, it's batting out the gate at like 67. It shouldn't be in a bottle at that percentage. It's just, and you just got to ask all sorts of questions at that point about what's happening now in that cut process for it to be as fainty as it is, for it to still be sitting at that high ABV. So I just had no, and I will still turn down a spirit if I'm like, I think this is faulted, or I don't feel like this is safe to consume. They don't do it very often, but I think it's worthwhile being able to go, hey, I'm just not sure about this. It doesn't, and consumers should be the same way. But in the inverse, I had someone call me and say, hey, so like if alcohol's like, above like 40%, like should it freeze? And I said, no, absolutely not. If it's, if it's above 40 ABV, you should be able to have that stuff in the freezer. You should be sweet as. And so they sent me a photograph of their bottle of gin at 40% that was frozen solid in the freezer. And I said, first, I had 2 questions. My first question was, have the teenagers been into it? And they were like, what are you talking about? I don't have kids. And then it was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah.
Just a question from the audience. What ABV does Cardrona usually cask at?
I can't give you an accurate answer to that.
Well, going back to an earlier comment, Hamo's grabbed a small pour of the Cardrona growing wings at a whopping 63.9.
Mm-hmm.
That is a monster.
From memory, it doesn't taste like a monster either.
No, it doesn't.
It's quite smooth.
So it's always been quite controversial, the bottling strength of these progress reports. So Just Hatch, Growing Wings, and Full Flight, and people have talked about in the past. They've been available in 375ml bottles. That is 100% about making it making it available to more people. And then that people have said, oh, but it's at such strong ABV. But the reality is, the whole point of those progress reports has always been to give people a glimpse into what's happening in the barrel, and give people the opportunity to experiment and play with it. So we're always very open about add water. We're not expecting people to drink it at that, but what we are giving you is a sample from the cask, so you can see what's happening with our Pinot barrel, with our bourbon barrel, with our sherry barrels. That's that's complex messaging to get across in a still maturing market. But
I think in any market, in all honesty, I think in any market, that's a difficult message to get across, that just because it is at that strength in the bottle, that's where it should be consumed at. Certainly not. I've done tastings of unreleased whiskies where I've had the sample at 4 or 5 different ABVs, and the flavor is entirely different across those different the different ranges, and it's finding that butter zone. That's the skill at the end of the day, isn't it? Finding that butter zone and where it.
Yeah, and I think I just got back from doing a earlier this year. I got to do an incredible deep dive. Can we talk American whiskey for a hot second?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I had kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity to spend a day with Andrea, who's the master of maturation, and Dan McKee, who is the master distiller at Michter's in Kentucky. Right. And they are, I think, an exemplary example of it's not just skill, it's science, and it's art. And so, there is, I think people often, it's easy to get caught up in the romanticism of a small craft distillery being all about the alchemy, the magic day that you discover the perfect balance, and the perfect balance of fermentation time, temperature, your yeast balance, and all those kind of, and it just kind of happens, and it's magical and it's wonderful. But most of the time, it's 100% science. And so, the question is how willing are people to be transparent and to go deep into understanding the science? And one of the things that I loved at Michter's was doing the side-by-side taste comparison of what they have learned and what they put into practice with their spirit when it comes to entry proof. So their barrel entry proof is very low. It's just about the lowest. It's just about the lowest that it can be to be able to be put into barrel following the American rules. But consequently, when you actually taste the side-by-side comparisons of what happens when it's being put straight into the cask at like still strength straight off the still, versus that lower entry point, and it is remarkable. Not just the difference in flavor profile, but actually the difference in mouthfeel and the difference in, the integrity of the spirit. And what's actually happening is that the water is working harder to help support that maturation process. And, it was just incredible to be able to be in their lab and to work through so many of those samples and to work through so much of the testing that they're constantly doing. Because, you would think, and oftentimes we do, you found the perfect recipe. No, that testing is constantly ongoing to make sure that it's sitting at exactly where it needs to be. And, I think that's one of the signs of maturity in our market is the further we get towards that science and to really understanding what it is that puts us on the trajectory towards the spirit we want to enjoy, the better off we all are.
The cool thing about that too is, so barrel strength and going down is a very, very valid question. And in America, they used to barrel strength a lot lower than what they do now. And in Australia, the same thing's happening. People are questioning, okay, 64% or 63.5. Why do we do it? Well, that's what they do in Scotland. But why do we do it? Right. And we're going down in barrel strength. And you understand that you've got more those wood sugars, there's more water-soluble compounds and what impact they have. And that's really exciting stuff. To me, that's the really exciting stuff. And we talked about learnings before. One of the things, I've been making whiskey for 9 years now. Started as indie bottling and then distillery 2 years after that, is unlearning things that I was taught and then separating things out and going, well, that was actually marketing, and pulling it out and going, oh, okay, and relearning and learning different ways. And I personally find stuff that's happening in America is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It's a very, very cool place.
I mean, they're an older, more established industry, but sort of only just if you take into account prohibition and then you take into account, the enormous leaps and bounds that have happened around, the definitions and the way that those categories are moving. And, for me, I think the emergence of American single malt is probably singularly the most exciting thing to happen, because it's pushing the rest of the world to think about single malt definitions and to think about, oh, what does this look like? And, and it was Rogue Brewing really that put a benchmark in, or they put a line in the sand around the whole idea and concept of terroir, taking that straight from their beer production and moving it across to their whiskey that they were producing. And that was in the Pacific Northwest, in the mid 2010, so 2014, 2015, right around the. Sorry?
Did you say Westland Distillery?
No, Rogue Brewing. So Rogue Brewing, which is sort of one of the iconic Pacific Northwest breweries in the States, they started producing a whiskey, right? Because they're making all this beer. They got the brewing kit. They're like, yeah, let's make some spirit. Let's do it. And so they transferred all of that information, like latitude, longitude of the grain, the barley, all of that. They transferred over to the way that they were labeling their whiskey products. And that was right about the same time that, Bruichladdich was starting to talk about local barley, and they were starting to, lay down some of those experiments. But, both very independent trajectories of two very different industries. And now we have, Westland obviously is amazing, probably one of my favorite American single malts, but Westwood.
Oh, yeah. Cracking
Westwood,
whiskey. Absolutely cracking whiskey.
Absolute banger, And they're leaning into. Yeah. And they're leaning into a lot of the same stuff that New World whiskey is really leaning into. And and then you go, okay, well, 10 years ago, what were we talking about? We were talking about New World whiskey, in the light of a sort of emerging from Japanese whiskey, and people like consumers still now coming to learn that actually, Japanese whiskey has really been world blended whiskey for 100 years plus. And I was in Japan recently with a couple of industry friends, and still just watching that story emerge, and you go, oh yeah, okay, so the whole category of world whiskey really being redefined before our eyes, and I think that's incredibly exciting and amazing to be part of it.
Yeah, wow. Todd just reminded us we're talking about Cardrona. We've really,
oh yeah, sorry,
really gone off on, but it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Loving this.
So
go back to Cardrona and equipment.
Yeah,
because
Rangi sounds like he might have an inside story for us.
Yeah, who are you, Rangi John? Hey, asking some particular questions.
So far, what's the future plans for Cardrona? Are we extending the barrel warehouse?
I think Rangi's been there.
Yeah, let me quickly consult with the disclosure statement. Yeah, okay. So here's what I can tell you, Rangi, is that inevitably, if you keep making whiskey, you have to have places to keep it.
Yeah, that's a hazard of the job.
From memory, it was the car park, wasn't it?
Yeah. Right.
So I cannot say anything more than that. But obviously, a big part of the Cardrona story is the purchase by International Beverage and finding a home within International Beverage and the broader Thai Bev family, which is an incredible opportunity for Cardrona to find a home for the distillery that can provide the input. And I wrote a story on this recently before joining that, the realization, or that New Zealand is a small market, and so whilst Cardrona has had incredible investors and incredible supporters, the likelihood of being able to continue to find the level of investment to realize the dream and the vision was becoming increasingly more challenging. And so the best answer for that is not to keep extending and diversifying your share kind of offering, but actually to say, right, how do we actually realize that investment now and find a home for Cardrona that can provide the investment and support to take Cardrona to the next stage, which is, moving from reduced production as we kind of got ready for the sale and as we move through COVID, back up to what the distillery was always designed for, which is 24/7 production. So, within 6 weeks of the sale, to be able to go back to 24/7 production, to have a full team of distillers working, and to see and to continue to be able to realize, it's amazing. You can turn up to Cardrona at 9:30 in the morning on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and it doesn't even have to be school holidays, and you will find people turning up ready for coffee, amazing food out of our kitchen, to have a really, just an incredible meal and hospitality experience at the base of the Cardrona ski field, and to go on a tour and to see and experience what's happening. And now it's amazing. I rock up to work in the morning, rock up to work. Sometimes I've rocked up just to visit, but since November, really, the stills have been running 24/7, and that sweet smell of fermented barley just fills the air. And, it feels like, okay, the future is pretty secure. In terms of, and so if we talk about that future, it obviously means expansion. And what that looks like is really exciting. Please stay tuned, as we say, you keep making whiskey, you got to put it somewhere.
Hang on, Luke. Hang on, Luke. Sorry. I had a question. I had my hand. I'm going to go and get a conversation stick. I've got one.
I couldn't see it. You were out of the window.
You've been doing all night.
Mine. Anyway, so the equipment you've got, the stills, the mash tun, everything you've got, it looks like you've hit the deck with just running with top of the line engineered equipment. Mm-hmm. So, as opposed to cobbling it together, with what you can. So that must have been a very bold move right off the bat.
Have you met Desiree?
No, but I'm going to, because I'm coming to NZ in the next 8 months.
Oh, great. Well, look, let me know when you're on your way. Let me know when you're on your way, and we'll be so delighted to show you around. So the thing about Desiree is probably one of the most intentional people that I know. And so it is really important to if we go right back to the beginning, as she was starting on her study journey into distillation and she spent like hours, days, weeks, months traveling around Scotland, but she spent a huge amount of time in America under the guidance and that kind of tutelage and apprenticeship of real master distillers. And part of that journey was an encounter with the Forsyths of Forsyth Stills. And if you come to the distillery, one of the things that you'll see in our cellar door is a reproduction print of the first ever sketch of a distillery, which Richard Forsyth Jr. Actually drew on a sketch pad for Desiree as they were talking about the plan for the distillery. So right from the get-go. And I think this is a mark of the character, but also the kind of relationships that revolve around Cardrona. It explains a lot about who we are and who Des is. And, so when those stills were commissioned from Forsyth, absolutely nothing but the best. If we want to make the best whiskey in the world, side note, we do. We want to make the best whiskey in the world. World's most admired whiskey. That's what we're gunning for here, right? Anywhere that you see Cardrona, we want it to be the thing that people are reaching for, that they know it to be aspirational and inspirational. And so you don't get there by pursuing anything less than the best. So everything from the architecture of the building to represent and to house those stills in a way that made a world-class tourism destination and experience for people that wanted to experience the home of Cardrona, through then to, nothing but the best, those Forsyth stills, our German column still for our gin production. Everything the absolute best that it could be. Obviously, would we have liked those stills to have, been a few extra 1,000 litres bigger? Yeah, cool. But we'll get there. And it's a mark of the relationships that, for the.
So how big are the stills?
Oh, yeah, okay. Look, I knew you were going to ask me that, and so I have cunningly already pre-prepared a pull-up of the website. Cardronadistillery.com will tell you everything you need to know. But so Roaring Meg,
doing a Joe Biden there. Come on, you're doing a Joe Biden there. Come on.
No. So Roaring Meg and Gentle Annie. the girls, as I call them, I like to go and say hello in the mornings, partly because it's warm in there. So Roaring Meg 2,000 litres, Gentle Annie 1,300 litre spirit still, and then our Jacob Carl continuous stills and a finishing still. So JC1 7.5 metres continuous column, and then JC2 7.5 metres finishing still, and Pretty Betty, and she's our 600 litre copper gin still. So there's a real
why Roaring Meg and Gentle Annie.
Look, if you're actually a New Zealander, I'm
Yeah, I
almost
know.
disappointed by your geographical knowledge here.
Yeah, I know why it's called Roaring Meg. Don't worry.
Yeah. So reference to the local geography and landmarks. So yeah, that's why.
And in particular, a special lady of the night who had a bit of trouble getting across a river once.
Yes. Yeah.
Apparently, she was roaring on her way across, so they called her Roaring Meg from that moment on.
Yes. So Roaring Meg is in fact our is our bubbling kind of wash still that likes to get aggressive from time to time. But yeah.
Oh, everyone's frozen.
Oh
no, everyone's back.
No.
Can we talk about barley?
Can we talk about what?
Barley.
Dumplings.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
no, we have I'm just answering Ian's question, but I can answer your question instead, Crafty.
no, they're one and the same. Go for it.
Yeah. For when the distillery first started, there was not a grain producer that could actually provide the volume and quantity of malt that was required in the strain that was suitable for distillation. And so we were at the very beginning importing from England, and classic, just absolute classic, the Scotch model. So Laureate, very popular, as you would know. So what's happened as a result? Sorry, yeah,
distillers malt, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so what's happened as a result of the growth of the industry and again, significant relationships, is that across a number of distilleries, there's now significant enough volume, and so there are a range of malt providers that now provide. They grow the grain locally, so our grain is grown in Canterbury, still the same strain, but producing. We don't experiment really. There are some distilleries in New Zealand that are experimenting with grain, but at Cardrona we're pretty locked in. We know that we know what our barley choices give us. We like what they give us, and so we work with it.
Mm.
Very cool. Very, very cool. And you got the Distillers Conference coming up fairly shortly, haven't you?
Sure as heck do, yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about it the other day, and I said I'd love to come. Can't come this year, but I'm sure as damn going to try and come next year. So, what's your anticipation of that?
Look, I think it's going to be great. The Distilled Spirits Aotearoa, which is the group of it's the industry body for smaller distillers or smaller producers in New Zealand. That commitment to ongoing education, learning from each other, spending time together, considered pretty important. There's a bit of that's been modelled, I think, across the ADSA, and so I love a lot of what the ADSA do. So the conference really an opportunity for education and resourcing. So we bring in guests from IBD. And I think somebody tallied it up the other day, and it's like $17,500 worth of education that's available over the day of the conference. If you were to go and get access to those resources, to those people, to those speakers, covers a range of things in terms of. I mean, last year was a lot of health and safety. We had Adam Chapman come and share his really poignant story that I think is just something that. You got to hold with some delicacy and some grace and some compassion, for how that story is still unfolding. But, an incredible privilege to have him share that. And I think probably a real eye opener for a lot of distillers here, just to realize, that actually for a lot of people, you're dealing with people's lives. And when we talk about health and safety, and so, that's the benefit of a conference like that. There's also a bunch of last year a number of different presentations around chemistry and really understanding palate and flavor and how those things come together. This year there's a lot of work around brand and around product development, but also getting your brand or your business ready for growth, ready for sales. So Desiree is going to be sharing the Cardrona story. I'm going to be sharing around the art of storytelling for your brand, something that I'm really passionate about.
Beautiful.
So
yeah, that's cool. Looks like Luke's been kicked out of the pub.
Yeah, I think he was stayed there one beer too many or something.
I think I overstayed my welcome, and now I'm just wondering. Hopefully, my Wi-Fi won't cut out.
No, we got you. We got you. Hey, while you're there,
But,
right in front of a whiskey shop by the looks of it.
are you in the Golden Mile?
I'm in the Golden Mile.
Yeah,
can I hear a
tell.
bagpipe? Are those bagpipes?
They are bagpipes. They've been playing almost constantly since I've been here. He was literally just around the corner from where I was sitting, which is a lovely background, really. It's
Absolutely
nothing
perfect.
nothing better than cats being strangled.
Yeah. It's a cool place, the Golden Mile, isn't it, Luke? It's touristy.
It's very cool.
Oh
Where am
no!
I? Old whiskey town.
Apparently, there's a Royal Mile whiskey shop which you
That's
should
where
check
I-
out, Lukey.
Well, actually, Luke, if you have not yet, can I recommend that you go to WM Cadenheads,
Hold on.
which I believe they're still on the Royal Mile. And what you want to do is just go straight to the Cask Inns cabinet. So the Cask Inns cabinet at WM Cadenheads
God, you
is
hang on. I got to show you something, guys. If I can find it. Cadenhead, absolutely Cadenhead. Hold on. Jesus,
But it's
21,000 photos.
You might be getting your Wi-Fi is starting to play up a bit, Lukey. Sorry.
yeah.
Can you see that?
No.
No.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Wrong one.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Up.
Oh, look, there it is.
That's the Cadenhead board.
Yep.
I'll try and get it right, Luke.
There you go. Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. And what
There
you
you
want
go.
to so what
Beautiful.
you want to go for, you want to go straight to the cask ends cabinet, which is just the little bottles, which is just whatever's left in the cask, and you'll find some absolute treats and delicacies in there. So that was probably one of my favorite parts of my first trip to the Cadenheads on Royal Mile, cask end cabinet.
That sounds like I'll have
picked
to
up
find where that
yeah.
is here somewhere.
It's not hard to find. Keep walking. I picked up a Brook Laddie. I just discovered 2000 oh, hang on. It was 2009. No, 2012. I went to Edinburgh. But I'd been drinking Brook Laddie for a number of years, and I found a Brook Laddie pre Mark Rainier, Jim McEwen, and I was so excited. And I've still got the bottle at home.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so cool.
It's a treasure shop.
Yeah. Lukey's frozen in full gob off.
No, he's just in awe. He's just pausing and going.
Or something. Yeah, it's just amazing whatever he's looking at just there.
He's a vagabond in Edinburgh, and wouldn't we all rather be there?
What Snake says.
What's this?
Luke
Luke?
can just get used to sounding like William Shatner as his Wi-Fi stops and starts the conversation.
Lord Schmear Egghead. He's back.
Yeah,
He's back. He's still looking for Cadenhead.
Anyway, so we're now at just over an hour, and poor old Tash has been up for a lot longer than us.
I reckon we can go another 10.
You can go another
What do you
10
think?
hours, minutes.
Have you got 10 questions for 10? 60-second, 10-second questions, 50-second answers. That'll fill up 10 minutes of either absolute trash or gold.
Okay. So, question 1.
Mm-hmm.
What's your definition of whiskey terroir?
Ah, wow. Okay. What's my definition of whiskey terroir?
Yeah.
I think whiskey is the trouble with terroir is that it's pretty locked into an idea. If we adopt the French or the wine way of thinking about it, it's very much locked into land and soil and climate. I do think that. but whiskey has a couple of other factors. So whiskey has time and temperature. Because you can't just factor this. Some people would say, well, if we're really going to adopt true terroir, then we're only going to talk about the source of the barley. But I think if you really start to talk about terroir, the difference and why I think if you're going to talk about whiskey terroir, you have to talk about climate, you have to talk about humidity, temperature, and time, because we in New Zealand are a great example of a really geographically long landscape, and we have an awful lot of climate variation, and you see the impact of climate variation on the terroir of whiskey. At the same time, and Dave Broom has talked about this extensively from his travels in New Zealand grown barley does have a sweet creaminess to it that seems to emerge in almost every New Zealand whiskey that's made with New Zealand barley. So I think, my definition is it is the quality of the barley or the quality of the source grain, the terroir of that source grain, as amplified by its environment and what the land gives it over time.
Cool. Statement 1. Question 2.
Okay.
Barley doesn't really add flavour because you go through distillation and it's a destructive process. So it's really all about the barrel.
No. Barley is deconstructed to leave its essence in the new make spirit, which is then amplified and multiplied and given texture and complexity through the barrel and through time. Yeah. I sat for 8 hours in an argument between Dan and Andrea at Michter's, where they banter this backwards and forwards all day, and I'm like, it's an interdependent relationship. You cannot separate it. The quality of the new make spirit, which comes from the characteristic of what the barley is broken down to in its essence, is what you put into the barrel. And if you put rubbish into the barrel, you will get rubbish out.
Love it. Love it.
So before we go to question 3, apparently Lukey lost connectivity. Do we believe that, or do we believe that?
No, I think
he sent us the message.
I reckon he got the cat in head, and it doesn't work on the back of the door.
Mm-hmm.
Bright shiny object.
What a sweet, sweet distraction. All right, go.
Next question. So,
can I tell you the story about the falcon? Ask me a question about a falcon.
I'll do that. No, Luke's going to do
direct
that.
Direct fired stills or standard stills?
My question is...
direct fired stills or standard stills?
Oh, okay. You got it. Next question.
Well, I've just asked it twice.
It depends on the outcome that you are trying to achieve and why you're making the choice between them. Yeah. That's just a tool in the hand. Like a knife is a tool in the hand of the chef. Your choice of still has impacts on your sustainability. It has impacts on your cost of goods. It has, it has a range, depending on the grain you're working with, it might also have an impact on just how messy it is to clean up. But I think ultimately it depends on what you're trying to achieve with it. So yeah, it's a question that the answer requires way more nuance and investigation. Sorry that I can't give you something direct on it.
That's good. Question.
Whatever you do, have a reason why.
What's all the fuss about yeast? Does it really make a difference?
Cool. I'm going to leave you to have that argument with generations of winemakers around the world.
Boom!
And this sourdough baker.
Yeah.
I could tell you a story about Stanley, the sourdough starter, who has journeyed with me through 3 different climates now, and I can tell you how important yeast is captured in the essence of how long it takes him as a wild yeast starter to adapt to a new environment and then to produce the same quality of leavening and flavor in the sourdough loaves that I bake. And so if I can experience it as a home baker in that environment, it is only amplified in any process that yeast and fermentation are involved with. So yeah, yeast matters.
Wow. Next question. Water. Really, does it make a difference if it's going through filtration?
Yep, because you got choices about how you filter and what you filter with. So yeah.
Cool. Still filtration.
Oh yeah, good. Okay, great. Yeah, let's go. Sorry, what was that?
So I personally, I hold in very high regard, and I believe it with my soul, from what Jim McEwen has shown and taught me through various tastings, that your oils, your fats, your protein. And I personally believe a sting in the alcohol is softened when a whiskey is not chill filtered. And when you chill filter, you're ripping away, pumping out some really big flavors and length of flavor. Do you think or not?
I disagree with nuance. I think that as with anything, filtration, however you choose to filter, that filtration, chill filtration or non-chill filtration, I think it became really popular for producers who were looking for a particular outcome. So it's just like the knife, right? It's just a tool, and it's how you use it. And so if I'll go to the Michter's example, they are transparent about the fact that they use chill filtration, but they have a custom methodology and recipe for chill filtration for every single one of their distinct product items, which is designed to produce a certain profile and characteristic. And so in some of those profiles, they are looking to remove some of those bolder flavors and some of that sting because they're looking for an approachable cocktail mixing and in others they're dialing it all the way down because they want to maintain that, but they want to give some overall roundness and character. So again, I think it's about I think the one thing that we could probably agree on is that if you are going to use chill filtration, you have to use it with a deep base of knowledge and a really fine finesse in how you wield that particular tool in your arsenal, to not disrupt or take away from or diminish the product. Because I think like the examples that Ian uses are examples where there is that possibility of diminishing the end product, and so that's what we want to avoid. And that's why being able to say, hey, this hasn't gone through chill filtration became a big deal, because it spoke to, hey, it hasn't been tampered with, there's no risk that there's anything less in the bottle here. But the reality is that you can use that as a tool. And I would liken it a little bit to the Lynchburg method in terms of using charcoal filtration at certain stages of the process, right? Same as choosing how you wield your barrel entry proof to determine a particular outcome. So I don't think it's ever appropriate to say your whiskey is wrong or your product is wrong because you're using this methodology. It's totally fine to say this methodology doesn't work for the outcome that we're producing. It's not necessary for what a lot of people are wanting to produce, but for some people and for some brands, it actually aids them in what the final outcome is.
That is
and
a great response. And Hamo commented on it, and 100% agree. Great response. Regional whiskies. So Highlands, Islay, Lowlands, etc. I've had a very interesting discussion in Australia that this particular individual said there needs to be a regionalized, or there needs to be an Australian style of whiskey, regionalize it. And my counter argument was, we are so different with so many different stills, different climatic conditions, different barrel programs, different. So New Zealand, is there regional styles developing, or is it very much up to the individual distillery?
It's very much up to the individual distillery. We don't have enough concentration of distilleries in particular areas to be able to say this is a conclusive trend, right? Or this is the style of a region. This is the style of Waiheke. This is the style of Pocono, and a lot of that style is influenced by, and this is the difference, right, between, because I do think sometimes it can be a little lazy to say, oh, this is a whiskey region and this is how we do it. That would be like saying, oh, all Tasmanian whiskey is the same, but it's really not, because I've been there and I've tasted a variety of different new makes, and some are light and fruity and almost kind of delicate, and 70% are big, oily, robust, rambunctious kind of characters that kind of need a good whack across the bum and to be put into their room for a long time, and I say that as a good thing, not as a bad thing, right? Like really characterful new make. But there's that variance. And if you're saying, oh, well, it's 70% this and it's 30% this, then I don't think you can say, oh, that's a regional style. In the same way, what people talk about as regionality by way of style in Scotland is not. It's regionality by way of geography, because I could put a Speyside and a Highland and an Islay whiskey next to you and say, okay, tell me where each of these come from, and I would almost guarantee that you wouldn't be able to pick between them, because there are such a variety of styles now. It used to be that whiskey was determined by a number of the characters, right? So what you had around you, wood versus peat, what you had around you is what you used to fuel the fire that you malted your barley on, and that had an impact on flavour. That's not the case now. You can buy in, and a huge number of Scottish distilleries are buying in their malted barley, whether it's peated or unpeated, from a supplier in England. So let's just get realistic about what we call regionality I think is way more challenging. I do think that as well, my comment before about saying regionality can be lazy as we search for definition, or really what we can be saying is we're searching for marketing collateral to say, you love Auckland, buy this whiskey. The truth is, and I would use Cardrona, I would use us as an example. Desiree very clearly had a style of whiskey in mind that she wanted to produce, and that style has an awful lot in common with Highland styles of whiskey. It's never going to be a Highland whiskey because it's made here and it's made from our barley, but that's at a style that is crafted through the choice of malt. It's crafted through the choice of yeast. It's crafted through the fermentation process. It's then what happens through distillation and then through maturation. And so all of those things, once you get to maturation, as I said before, right, amplified by the context of terroir being time, climate, heat, temperature, all of those things. But the 4 stages or the 5 stages before are equally important in determining the style. You choose the style of new make that you want going into your barrel based on a bunch of decisions that actually have very little to do with where you're making the spirit, unless we get into that whole biodynamic scenario.
I've got to say, you're doing well for your second day. You really are.
Well, second day at Cardrona, but a lifetime of whiskey.
I know.
Yeah.
Last question. My last question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys love Peter Bignell as much as we love Peter Bignell?
Categorically as New Zealanders or as Cardrona? I don't know that I know what the official I don't know how Cardrona feels about Peter Bignell. I think Peter Bignell is a really inspirational I think he's an inspirational character who probably is misunderstood by some sectors of the industry, if I was to be completely honest. I don't think enough New Zealanders probably know or understand exactly what it is that he is about and what he's doing. I personally find him really inspiring. And one of his whiskies that I had last...
cheap products, so that goes for...
I mean, yeah. Look, I had, I would say probably one of the best whiskies that I had last year at the Tasmanian Whiskey Week, and also one of the most confronting whiskies that I had at the
Bogan Burnout.
I'm not going to say anything other than to say that the best whiskey and the most confronting whiskey that I had were both Peter Bignell whiskies. So,
not surprising, really.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap up my part of it. I'll tell you my Peter Bignell story. Right, I've known Pete for many years, but I was at the Oak Barrel, which is a place in Sydney. It's a bit of a whiskey community bottle shop / events place. It's an awesome place. And I rocked up and I was talking to the spirits guy, and he goes, "Oh, Pete's just sent something." And I go, "Oh yeah, what is it?" And he goes, "Have a look at this." And it was a 10-litre cube with tape on it saying Bogan Burnout, right? And I went, "Oh yeah, cool." And at the Oak Barrel, they have a bar which is just open bottles from different events, right? And I said, "Can I go and see what's on the bar?" He goes, "Yeah, go." I was about, I would say, 5 meters away, right? And I've got this whiskey, and I go, "I'll taste that later, but I just want to try some other things." And I was on a lighter whiskey, and all of a sudden I started going, "What the fuck is that?" It got airborne. It was 5 meters away. It got airborne, and I just could not get it out of my mouth. It was on my skin. It was on my clothes, and I don't know what it was, right? Anyway, a couple of years later, there was a group of distillers, and we're all together, and we're all talking with Pete, and someone brought up burning rubber tires, and we all looked at Pete because he was trying to make the most biggest, gruntiest, smoky, whatever whiskey in the world, and we all looked at Pete, and he sort of goes, he wouldn't answer, right?
Yeah.
But that's the sort of shit Pete would do, right? Fascinating, absolutely fascinating guy, held in such high regard in the craft distilling space. Mad professor, absolute mad professor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the end of my questions and statements at 1 minute, 1 hour and 29
minutes.
So Todd, do you want to
wrap things up?
You want to bring the roller coaster to a halt, and we'll lift the.
Once you run out of steam, I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. So, Tash, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Absolutely.
And, I don't think I could say it any better than our listener Hamo here. Got a quality guest.
Oh, thanks, Hamo.
Insightful discussion. So thank you very much for being part of our little thing and shooting the shit with us.
Hey, absolute joy, guys. Yeah, loved it, and can't wait to have you guys back at the distillery or at the distillery for your first time. Hey, Mo, you should come too.
Oh, we've got a when's plan 2 part planned for. Well, I was thinking
we'll do a live session next year. Let's lock it in. We'll do a live set because we do a live audience sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Let's do a 2025.
I know a very good venue over there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Might do it live from Cardrona. Yeah.
Hey, I'm sure we can make that work.
That'd be super cool, actually.
It would be great to have you guys on again. And obviously Sarah as the head distiller over there it would be great to get her insight into all things Cardrona as well. So
sure would. She's an absolute star. She's a rock star. So
having said that, just please pass on our best wishes to her, and hopefully she gets a speedy recovery from where she is right now. Okay. Again, thank you for your time, and
don't go away.
Listening.
Don't go away. Hang around for a second. Yeah.
Will do.
2 weeks' time, we will be talking to the team at the Canberra Distillery.
Canberra Distillery, awesome.
That's locked in, and they'll be
on and Co. Yep, that'll be awesome.
Yep. So please join us in 2 weeks. Now,
hang on.
Also, we should say hi to Daniel, other AKA Slow Drams, who's watching from Florida. From Ology Distilling. Hey, mate. Good to see you. And yes, some whiskey does need just a slap across the bum.
Yeah. And Todd, who we got coming up? We got any interesting characters coming up in the future?
Still trying to get hold of Todd Leopold from Leopold
Brothers. So we're going to have a deep dive on 3 Chamber Still and what is going on there, and floor maltings and everything else.
So if that goes to plan, that will be sometime in August.
Yep. And Todd's committed. We just haven't locked the actual date. And then we got some guy who lives in Barbados, I believe.
Yeah, Richard Seal.
Foursquare.
From Foursquare. So he's
the legend.
He's locked in for the early September. I think the 5th of September he's on.
Yep.
No, sorry, get that wrong. The 19th of September.
19th of September. Yeah, that's the live one. Yeah.
And guys, that will be a live event at
Bar 26.
Bar 26. So look out for ticketed options when we get closer to that, and we look forward to seeing as many of you there as possible. I think there's only room for about 50 of us, but it'd be really good to have that pumping. And obviously you can listen to it online anyway. Having said that, thank you again to everyone for listening to us, and hope to see you again soon.
Cheers, guys, as always.
Bye.